Thank you for taking the time. I wasn't expecting both of you.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah, whenever that possibility comes, like even Ryan, even though he's creating the soundtracks for most of the films, it's still awesome that he can join the initial calls too to get a feeling of just the client, and then who knows, years later it goes.
Do you have
Yeah.
the permission to do this?
No, I didn't know I needed.
No, you can't.
Okay, but on the outside?
Outside, you
Yeah.
can do
Okay,
this.
okay, okay. No problem, no problem. It's just a little call. Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, no
Is there
problem.
no tripods in the museum?
Yeah, I actually brought. I always have like a little portable tripod with me everywhere I go.
I know that exact feeling. I mean, I'm always sneaking into places and taking, really run and gun shots.
Now you get another aspect of it.
I haven't been to this Hadid building.
Yeah, I mean, it held up nice. And I mean, what's really cool too is in the museum restaurant, like they already offered student discounts where for €9 you could get like a poke bowl and a coffee. And I was like, wow, that's even great. And you really saw tons of students in the museum coffee shop, like doing their homework and like really no one pushing them out. So I was like, that's pretty amazing. I haven't remember ever like a museum where they're allowing people to like kind of live it out. Yeah, it was cool.
This one seems very, connected on an urban scale.
Yeah, literally, look at that dude out there sitting. You can't, I don't know if you've seen, but he's sitting on his laptop. Yeah, there's a little kid on a scooter out here.
18 years ago, you guys were both studying in Milan and you had this idea. Spirit of Space was born. What did it feel like to start a company back then? And guys, what was the plan?
The truth is, it was like, I didn't know it could be a real thing. Like if I really looked at myself, I would literally be in studio watching like the director's cuts of movies, like how they made the movies, and so I'm like, I was always doing it, but I never thought of the two coming together, until we had this influential professor in Milan who kind of just said, hey, you don't have to become an architect. There's other ways you can do it. And he's the one who kind of saw Mike and I, kind of playing with the video camera and doing these things and kind of encouraged us. I grew up in such a kind of conservative house where you get the safe job, like you go to college, the safe job, you get your house and all that kind of stuff. But it was like everything just connected inside when I realized I could bring the two together. And I never looked back. I didn't care that we were, making $100 a month, like we were making nothing in the beginning, like our goal was, we wrote down like 5 architects' names. We wanted to get those architects and kind of worked our way up. We worked with a lot of local firms and things, and we got all 5 of them, which was cool over the years. And we just kept pushing, and a lot of education with our clients. Because I mean, even now, there's still, like Mike mentioned, this firm we lectured at the other day. It's a huge firm, and they're not doing video. Here we are, 20 years later, and there's still very few people actually making films. It's kind of nuts.
Architects need this as a tool. And that's exactly why we gave this talk to the firm's 50th anniversary. It's something they can't just overlook and hope that the marketing department gets the right people to do it,
So I remember watching an interview with you guys that's from a number of years ago where you say filmmaking is the next big thing for architects. And this was years ago. Firms will spend thousands building models, creating the flashiest 3D renderings and putting these elaborate presentations together, and nobody is even thinking about the power of filmmaking.
Yeah, I think today maybe that this wave will finally crash because the economical problems with architecture and how to prove our value as designers, students are really free to like capitalize on their interests without making it a business model. With the way that kids grew up, with social media and communicating through all these platforms and TikTok, and they'll actually easily incorporate that instead of like, quote unquote, oh, I have to stop what I'm doing as an architect and make a film. It's just a part of the process. Adam's been teaching for 9 years at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and it's always a sought after studio. And then he does like a seminar about where we base the work of Charles and Ray Eames documenting. And that was exactly the same thing, that they were proficient. They made over 80 films, on real film stock. And they did that not because their clients were asking for that. They did it because of their interests and that playfulness to just document, and because they were proud of it. And I think one thing for students or for even the professionals, if you really want to just to talk to someone that you think is doing or has seen interesting things or great experiences, then make a film, make an interview. You really capture that person's time, and that's the best way to just connect with people. I think that's really important, that it doesn't seem like a big burden. It should just should flow.
Especially when you have like 4K in your pocket. Like I encourage my students to use their phone to film, because I don't want them to feel that there's ever a barrier to pull out your phone and film in the model and get these real experiences. And it's crazy how architects, or at least the students, are still presenting how we presented in school 20, 25 years ago.
I learned about this through that master class. It's a series of all these top world professionals, and there's a part on David Lynch. And when you listen to him, he started his career as a fine artist, or painting, and he felt constrained, and that's why he got into filmmaking. Like, one of the most prolific filmmakers of cinema in our contemporary time, he started because he felt the constraints of being a painter pushed him there. That's what design and the buildings around us, through these constraints of maybe not there being the investment, or people kind of being reluctant to renovate something or just build a new structure, there's new opportunity to create experiences, and that can be through film.
So you chose to concentrate on filmmaking instead of practicing architecture in the traditional sense. I have this indirect quote from Bernard Schumi where he talks about the phenomenological experience of moving through a building, a city, or landscape as resembling the episodic experience of viewing a film, in that both produce spaces of narrative and sensorial encounter. For me, there's such a strong overlap between film and architecture. So do you think that your films are pieces of architecture in their own right?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way of looking at that. I think 100%, that's where the name Spirit of Space came from, is the idea that, we're filming it and we're bringing an experience to somebody, but no matter what, if we went back the next day, literally, or even the next hour, it's going to be different, right? Because it's always changing. And so we're kind of capturing this kind of experiential thing in time, the way people move a certain way. Like, it's never going to happen exactly like that again. There is a very kind of spiritual aspect to it. Architecture is about the experience over time, moving through a space. It's actually science. It's about empathy, right? Empathy, it's mirror neurons. When they realize that mirror neurons fire only when there's an action happening, when you have to see a movement, for empathy to actually happen, which is why photography, renderings, firms are spending all this money on those things, but they don't actually connect in an empathetic way, whereas film can.
For me personally, my foundations course, it was the second part, because I was a 3.5-year grad. So I had a structural engineering degree before I entered architecture. And I had this amazing experience. Grace Law, before she was the dean at Harvard, she wasn't a professor at the studio in Milwaukee. And she was also an early client of Spirit of Space. But she told us one of our first assignments was a precedent study. Everyone got this famous thing. I happened to pull the right straw and got Peter Zumthor's The Valve Thermal Baths. And at that time, the only way you could get a film about architecture was to get DVDs. We went to the library. We edited out all the parts of the interviews with Peter Zumthor, and we made kind of a music video. I found the soundtrack that had key elements, could be the synthesizers as the water, the rhythm as like the beat. And we edited this music video. It was 3 minutes long from the 30-minute documentary. We won an award for the AIA student. I got a projector and connected to my laptop, and we played that along with scaled models. And it was so much fun. And that film clearly explained to the other students. And when Grace told us, she said, you guys as architects, it's your job to get skilled at reading plans, reading sections, the axons, studying models, just reading, mentally honing your ability to create space. Because she said, it's your job. That's why there are these El Croix, and why they put plans and sections in Arch Record, like a coffee table version of these projects. She's like, you need to create that space. So for me, it still lives on, that especially in the world we live today, where it's not fair to just jump in a plane and go to the space, that you can recreate a very large portion in your mind of that spatial awareness by watching the video, going through it and showing details and showing overalls and flying with a drone, or watching someone sketch. There's so much that can happen. And I think for many people, that is the architecture that is as close as they'll ever get to some of those buildings, and it still should be regarded as spatial awareness.
Yeah, and that's where the poetry comes in. You know, like it's what I tell my students. Like, I don't want you just to take the camera and walk through a building. You know, you got to be creative and bring in, you know, show the scale, show the handle, you know, cut these things together. Like you can actually start to build emotion versus just like a literal walking through. You know, you got to bring that poetry into the equation. And then, yeah, you're right. Then they become little pieces of architecture on their own. I love that.
On your website, you say, "We believe in storyboards over scripts. We don't conduct interviews, we guide conversations. We observe rather than directing it." I found that really thought-provoking. What is the role of serendipity, spontaneity, chance, unplanned creativity, and letting a scene play in filmmaking?
It's everything. Like it's literally everything. It's the exact opposite of photography where you stage people and take the photo, and that staging is always fake. It's never real, you know, like, and oftentimes you can tell it's totally staged. You even can see the photographer in the shot, you know, I mean, we've been on lots of sets with photographers. I mean, you know, this is not shade at photography at all, right? There's definitely, you know, a need for it. But it is something about, you know, they go in and they really find these shots and snap them. And there's a lot of footage that doesn't get used because we're hitting record and letting it play and watching how people are using a space and reading a space and experiencing the space. In their latest film that is going to be coming out soon, there's like this big atrium where students can kind of sit, and there's like these little metal kind of wires for like railings. And so I'm filming up, you know, this huge balcony, and all of a sudden all these feet start sticking out. And that was the first thing the client had mentioned. I love the shot of the feet, right? You can't write that in a storyboard. It really just showed how beautiful people are in their spaces. We use Nikons, we use smaller cameras. It almost looks like we're not filming. We don't want anything to be planned out, really. We wait. We do a lot of waiting and observing. That is life. Life is about serendipity. What's just happening with Mike here, the security guard, taking him out, and now we get a better scene. You have to live and find that serendipity.
Yeah, no, even this, I'm sure that in any book written about this project's already 14 years old. The way when the kids get picked up from school and the moms bring their skateboards or scooters, and then this is like a skate park. I have no idea, was that ever intended? That's what's exciting. It's like you're going to notice some things when maybe the client first says, okay, here's where you guys can put all your equipment while you're filming, and you're just taking it in. All the stuff that you read or diagrams or past interviews and stuff, it just goes out the window, and you really just tune into like, oh man, I noticed that, or the sun came in the window at this time. Let's make space for that. You know, you only have this 24-hour window, depending on the season, how long your shooting day is. And that's really where you have to prioritize for those moments that might not even happen. And that's the thing that's strange too. The more autonomous cameras can become, you know, it's probably still the most boring piece of footage you could ever watch is the construction time lapse of a building being built, because they don't take any risks at all. They go from the safest point of view, which shows way too much information. I can't just blankly say it's not interesting. But when our clients ask us, hey, we're going to start construction, it's of a 5-year period, what's the perfect camera to get that will never have to move? And we just say like, no, you should move it at least once a week or maybe once a month. Look and say, what's blocking now? What's interesting now? It doesn't have to just be fixed. It's just so amazing. There's a million perspectives of that you could show. And the parallax, when you get onto a site, changes so much that I think that a great example is like when you watch a moderator talk into the camera. I mean, except for now where there's AI where they can change the concentration in the eyes, we notice the slightest movement in the eyes and can tell if someone's reading a teleprompter or not. The audience, the person has so much empathy for like walking through the space that we would know if I tried to tell that kid, oh, you were a little bit off that line, could you come here on the curve? You know, like he would be like, am I doing it right? It would look so unnatural. In order to get that shot, we actually use tripods that are more meant for photojournalists, like in war areas. And they don't make it anymore than the Manfrotto Neotech 458B. It's a hydraulic kind of pump that typical cameramen, they have such big cameras, they have this thing, a level on the tripod legs, and then you rotate it so it's perfectly level. That scene is long gone.
No.
You have to get the shot.
But actually,
Yeah.
what Mike's doing right here, like Mike, I am absolutely I'm just watching the background. But that's what we do. Like, and you'll
Yeah,
notice
this
that
kid's got look at his remote control car. I don't know if you can see
yeah,
it.
I mean, this is the best part of what we get to do is just sit and watch and see how people explore space. Like this is actually like Mike. If we were filming it, it would look like this.
And this
I mean,
is something I really don't see a lot too, but like Zaha, her buildings are so iconic. But the interesting thing to me is her graphic design, her 2D, she opens up so many pathways where like people just feel they're in a huge public space. But just because there's a change from the stones to the walkway, these people are having these phone conversations and they feel free from each other, even though there's nothing you can hear them. And I think that's amazing too, that her spatial awarenesses, even on the 2D surfaces, just do so much to make engaging. People don't walk around looking at the ceiling. They're guided, you know.
Speaking of letting things unfold, so some of your films have got spoken dialogue, talking heads, interviews. Other more conceptual films focus more on the experiential quality of the building. Merely a camera moving through the space elicits an emotional reaction. How do you decide when to explain the architecture and when to let it speak for itself?
honestly, that's usually the client. You know what the client's use is. They are paying for the film. For example, Stephen Hall often he can't bring his students to his buildings, and so he wants us to film him walking through his buildings, explaining it as he would to his students.
Tour group, yeah.
You know, and so sometimes we'll push for, I really think you should do a poetic film on this one, you know, or if they want a poetic one, hey man, this story that you just told us, it's got to be part of it. It's really flexible and kind of what the end result is. And sometimes with Stephen Hall's films, we'll do two. We'll do one of him walking through it and one just poetic, because they serve different purposes. The one of him walking through, he uses for lectures and his students. The poetic one actually gets him more work.
Now it's just time, and we know that there will be, you know, Instagram reels, there will be all these things. There will just be moments that you don't want to show the 3-minute film because you've lectured about it for 5 years and you want to just show a 30-second version. And we saw that with Jeannie Gang. It was constantly being tailored and re-digested of how she's going to present all the way up into her TED Talk, where over 10-year period at that time, we could quickly make things that it just supported her without her ever having to look back at the screen. And I think that that's important today too, to know that editing is just another chance to reinterpret it. And during the pandemic, Arch Daily reached out to us and they said, you know, at that time, TikTok only also had a 1-minute time window for this content. And it was so refreshing for us to have someone to look at like a 5-minute film where there were multiple interviews and to really break that down, where she made her own narrative as an architectural journalist and made a 60-second version of that sometimes told a better story than our original. I have to leave too.
Yes, there is a problem.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Private policy.
Yeah. It's just a private conversation. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah,
That is
it's okay.
crazy, though, Mike. That's so nuts.
Okay, Mike, now you're in the parking lot.
Yeah, no, actually, someone asked a great question at this last thing that was based on Eames, and they just said, how do you guys incorporate playfulness into your job and stuff? And because that was a huge part of the Eames, and letting the big CEOs of IBM come to Venice Beach and look at models and play pinball machines and all kinds of stuff. And I said, yeah, I wrote a hip hop rap song about this park that we did for landscape architect Michael van Valkenburg, and we got to perform it for him while we were interviewing him on site. And that's special. Architects have such a hard job. You have to do this sometimes 8 to 8, daily, and you finish a project out over a 10-year span. Sometimes people don't even last that long in one company before they see the building be built. So it's like we need to incorporate our hobbies and having fun and enjoyment, and maybe pushing back a little bit, having that objective constraint of taking a camera out to the site, even if you're just doing redlining. I think it's really can breathe some life and connection on a personal level to your clients as an architect.
So I remember hearing in an interview interview that you have a dedicated composer slash sound designer on your team. How important is the audio track when setting the tone and the atmosphere of a film?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. You know, one, you can quickly understand, or when someone grabbed really bad royalty-free music, right? I mean, they all sound the same. Two, anything that's popular, like you're competing with someone's memory of their past experience. Like you need something. Like my students, I'll show them, there's a fun clip on YouTube. They show the scene from Pirates of the Caribbean, and it's a scene where Johnny Depp comes in on the boat for the very first time, and they'll play it with like comedy music or a suspenseful, or like it's totally goofy, but the whole meaning changes. It's no different than like I'm looking outside and I see my trampoline. Every year when I put up my trampoline, I think of George Clooney, because the very first time I set up the trampoline, I was listening to a podcast with George Clooney. Sound gets embedded in your brain. You need to actually have someone that can listen to the architecture, sometimes literally. Ryan will literally record sounds of the space or making sounds in the space, understanding the meaning and the feeling behind it, and composing it to our footage. Yeah, it's everything to us. It's so important to have that custom kind of tailored suit, you know, to that specific project.
Goethe, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, was like the first person in the 1800s to say architecture is frozen music. It's so immersive. Even when you're looking at our films on the phone, you might look away, but you're not turning off your ears and you hear the music. Technically, they say it's 70% of the film, but it is so immersive. And for us, even just discussing with your clients, if we're not saying if you make a film, but talking to your clients, what do they like to listen to? Do they like to listen to classical music? Is there just ambience, or did you record the birds there? It's a way to connect to the clients that you're showing it for. It's another way to break free, to just focus on what am I experiencing out of this space?
What else are you guys excited about in the future of architectural video or filmmaking?
We want to create more immersive environments. Right now, we're talking with a client about having an outdoor open air premiere this fall. Some of the people that saw us from looking down at the windows of their buildings, seeing us film, we'll have a chance to talk to them. I want to celebrate these films of architecture more. It should be more of a community engagement.
When they asked, how do you guys deal with play? For me, it's just being with Mike on site. My clients see it too. Like we're kind of infectious. We're like kind of like these opposite. I'm very like introverted. Mike's very extroverted, and we're like this kind of like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You know, we're just optimistic and love just like being together on site and watching and exploring. And it's just hypnotic to experience these buildings. I mean, we're just so blessed and lucky to get to go to all these amazing spaces around the world and film them.
I just want to say one last thing. If this is for architects out there, just thinking of like, okay, how do I even start? Don't watch our films. Don't compare. Don't look at theoretical ways of composing the shots. Just bring the site to your studio. Bring it into the presentation, study the culture of your clients, of the solution you want to design for them. There can be so much homage that you do if you say, hey, you're a great practicing orthodontist. Like, I really just want to see what you guys do with the molds. Like, just because you're interested, I think that will make another kind of level for the relationship of the design you're going to build for their waiting rooms. And yeah, bring the site. Let you just show the phone to your other colleagues. Bring that experience of checking out the site before anything was there, or an existing building before you guys are going to renovate it or whatever. Just bring that to the studio, because you can't bring the studio to the site. It's much easier. Anybody that's taking this course, reach out, specific questions or concerns or issues that you have, and you want to do it. We just want this to happen more often and not be a big, precious thing. It's simple, it's fun, it's easy, it's valuable.